want you to tell me what your thoughts are on Brian, the transgender female, or the transgender woman, 'cause not a female, the transgender woman that won the local the local Miss America beauty pageant. I want to know what your thoughts are on that. I want to know if you think that Brian won that beauty pageant. Because Brian rightfully so, deserved to win the pageant, or if it was because of a agenda. And I want you, as far as like pertaining to transgender people, when it comes to competitions, like going forward, do you think that there should be boys and girls and men and women and trans men and trans women, or do you think that trans men should be able to or transgender women should be able to compete with, women and girls, and transgender boys should be able to compete with boys and men. So, go tell me what your thoughts are on that, and then I'll let you and Marty go back and forth.
I honestly have no idea who that person is. That's the thing. Like, I think people think that because like we're a community and stuff like that, we like always know about. Like, I have no idea who this person is. So you said the person's name is Brian, and they won a beauty pageant. Like,
Yeah,
hold
look
on.
up, look up Brian, last name Nguyen, and then look up beauty pageant. It should pop up on your Google. So it's a 19-year-old trans Asian transgender woman that competed in a local beauty pageant. I think it was in New Hampshire. Um, and if you just put it up on Google, you can see the other contestants. You can see Brian is much bigger than the other contestants in height and stature. Um, and you can, those other girls, those females, they worked really hard, to for that beauty pageant. Spent a lot of time working out, spent a lot of time dieting and things of that nature. But somehow Brian ended up winning the beauty pageant. So, like I said, I want to know what your thoughts are on that. If you thought that Brian was justified in winning, or if you thought that Brian won for another reason. And then I want you to speak on, when it comes to competitions, should transgender women be competing with women and transgender men be competing with men, or should they have their own separate category?
I mean, okay, so I'm looking at the pictures of her. Like, I mean, she's got like her makeup. She looks pretty and everything. Like, I don't know. I think that like it's. I don't. I feel like it's a weird conversation to have about whether or not she should. Like, she's the only BIPOC person that's there. The rest of the girls look like they're white. Um, I mean, I feel like there's layers to it. Like, is it possible that they want to seem like more woke or more inclusive, and so yeah, they're picking the BIPOC trans? Like, I mean, that's possible, but she looks pretty there. She's got her dress on. Like,
So,
I
so,
she could have gave like a really great speech about it. Like, there's so many factors that go into a beauty pageant on things like that. Like,
so in beauty
it's a
pageant,
local pageant. Like, it's like
traditionally,
a small town or something.
historically and traditionally, have when it comes to beauty pageants, have you seen beauty pageants with people built the way Brian is built? Have you seen any? And if you have you seen them win the competitions? Because there's
In a
there's
local
clearly
way,
there's
maybe. Like,
clearly
this is
there's
literally a
there's
local.
clearly a distinct difference in those other women. Like I said, they clearly prepared for that beauty pageant, and Brian clearly did not prepare for that beauty pageant. You can't look at those photos and say
You
otherwise.
you don't know that she didn't prepare. You don't know what work she put in. Like, people have different like that's like the way this is what when these conversations are there's like a level of frustration because the amount of internalized colonization that we show on the daily, like, she is an Asian woman. Like, I don't know what part of Asia she's from, but there are different types of like Asian people where their bodies are just built different than ours. So why are we holding a BIPOC person standard body standard to like a Eurocentric body standard of what like that's what I'm saying. If you had a Polynesian girl up there, she's gonna be bigger than all of those other women probably because like Polynesian people have like a very specific like body type that's like
Not their
culturally.
models.
So in
Are
a
you
Okay, listen.
I've
It
been to
ain't professional.
Polynesia. You can look up Polynesian
Like
models. You can look up Polynesian beauty contest, and you won't see no linebackers like Brian up there. I'm sorry.
you
Wait,
okay,
hold
like
on,
you know, like for
Pikachu,
instance, like
Pikachu.
Drew
Wait,
Apollo,
wait, wait,
like
wait,
she's Polynesian. She's
wait.
a big girl,
Wait,
even though
wait.
she's very fit.
She ain't a model. She's
No. Hold
popular
on.
for bashing
Wait.
men. That's all she's popular for.
Pikachu, are you
Come on.
telling me that you've seen in beauty pageants that are for women, that you have seen people built like Brian, or that you've seen people in a beauty pageant, in a Miss America beauty pageant, that you've seen people built like Brian win America beauty pageants?
I've
And
never seen them win
let's
women.
not bring up the fact that Brian is Asian and everyone is white. Okay, that just happens to be in that specific competition. When men do bodybuilding competitions and they're showing themselves off to the judges, those 100% of those men are in very much good shape. They're probably on steroids, all things of the nature. So they don't come there fat and out of shape and heavy set to a bodybuilding competition. So let's just be real. Have you seen girls built like Brian win a beauty pageant before?
I've never seen them win on the national level. However, I've never like again, this is you're acting like she won like the national Miss America thing. She won the Miss America within her local community. Do you understand like how the entry point for that is like so low? That does not mean she's gonna win like a larger one. That doesn't mean she's gonna win the one for her state. Or
It
even like
doesn't matter. It
she
doesn't.
won
I
the, like the local one. Are you
listen.
kidding?
Hold on, Marty. Listen. I know it. I'm the one that told you it was a local beauty pageant. That's not what we're talking about. It doesn't matter that she didn't win a national Miss America beauty pageant. She shouldn't have won that one, and she prevented the other girls that worked very hard and dieted, and their parents spent all that money.
You don't.
She prevented them from being able to move forward.
It's the thing is like you just like this is the problem is that y'all just don't want trans people to be happy. You don't want trans people to have success. Like she won a freaking local beauty pageant thing, and people are mad because she won the local one because she's taking
Yeah.
away. Only one person can win, no matter how much all the work people put into it. At the end of the day, only one of them could win, and all the rest of them were going to have their hopes and dreams dashed. So you're mad because she won her one little local one.
All
Like
right.
that's
So,
wild to
all
me.
right.
Like why can't
Hold
you
on.
let her be happy? She's a fucking teenager.
Hey,
Let her be happy that she won something.
Jane, well that's again what we're talking about. It's not just about her,
And
right?
yes,
It's
there's like
about hold
literally
on, let me finish for a second.
this is
It's
a
not just
plus
about
size
her.
a cisgender like plus size beauty pageant model. She won hold on, what year was this?
Yeah.
Hold on.
So it's not just about her, right? What it's about are all of the people that she was competing against too and how they feel. So it's not just about her victory and her moment in trans rights. It's also the fact that there were other girls who did the best that they could to try to prepare, and they didn't stand a chance because we want to pick a trans person. But it wasn't based off of hold on one second. Hold on one second. It wasn't based off of the fact that this was the best looking model by the standards that they normally measure the models. The other, you can tell that all the other women understand the standards by which they measure the models because they're all in the same body type, they're all doing the same things, they're all of them. So they know what the standards are to meet. And so now you have somebody who checks none of the boxes, but it's a popular issue in the media, and they get to win. So all the folks who did what they were supposed to do to try to meet the standards ended up losing. And because of that, that's what the problem is. It's not just about Brian. And I think that's where you guys lose a lot of folks is the inability to this seems intellectually. Can you see why to other people, like even though I get what you're saying, can you see why to other people who are outside of this, why you at this point seem disingenuous?
No, I don't seem disingenuous. Like I said, you just don't want to
Okay.
see
Well, there you
trans
go.
people be happy
No, you're
anyway.
gonna gas.
You're
Gonna
literally
no
making an
you
issue out of a
no
teenage girl
you're gonna
winning
gaslight
one
now.
beauty pageant in her
No, you're
local
gonna
area.
gaslight now. This is gaslighting.
It's not
This is
gaslighting.
gaslighting.
So
It
I'm showing
is.
you an example right now. This is from 2021.
Uh-huh.
This is a woman who she was in Southern Illinois, and she placed 12 in Miss Earth USA. The plus size models have been getting like more spotlight outside of trans
So
people.
you
This
think
is
it's
not
about
some like
plus size
random new
models.
thing. She's not the first
So you all right,
larger
so
model.
you think it's about plus size model and not the fact that this person is trans.
Noble just used that. Noble was saying
No,
that her
I just asked
size
you what you think.
was
I asked
indicative
you what
that
you
she had
think.
not prepared.
I asked you what you think. So you think that it's about because she's a plus size model who won and not a trans person.
I don't
That's what you're
know.
saying.
I don't know why they
You
chose
don't know. Okay. Well, you
the
knew a
pat.
whole lot in all these other conversations we've had. That just
Pageants.
seems
You
disingenuous.
understand? Pageants are not just off of how you look. They have you give speeches. They have you talk
We
about like
gave you this
community service.
obvious example.
There's so many other factors
It's
to
an
it that
obvious
dictate what
example.
you look like.
It's an obvious example.
There was literally wasn't there a miss where the person was had Down syndrome? Wasn't that one of the competition? Hold on, let me see something.
And it wasn't fair for the person with Down syndrome to win either if we're doing it just because they had Down syndrome. If we're doing it because they competed and they won, that's one thing. If they're doing it because they had Down syndrome and they competed, then that's another thing. It's
But
disingenuous to everybody else who is performing,
But that's
right?
what I'm saying. It's not your place to judge that. It was the judge's
I get
position.
it. I get
The
it.
judges
Well,
were put in a position to evaluate all of the contestants and pick the person that they thought was the best. And they picked someone who they felt like was the best. It's really none of our
we we get it.
authority or bandwidth to be able to say, oh yeah, they don't deserve that because we don't know the
You're very.
criteria that we're
I'm going
judging
to tell
people
you
on.
something. I'm going to
Unless
tell
you
you
go
something.
interview
I'm going to
the judges and they tell
hold
you,
on,
oh yeah, we don't pick
Jane.
them because they're trans. Why are we having a
Jane.
conversation on this?
Jane, when we talk to folks that are on your side of the aisle, you guys are very, very comfortable talking about the hearts and minds and thoughts of other people and assigning toxic masculinity, misogyny, and transphobia and all of this stuff when you are talking about the hearts and minds of other people. But then when it's convenient, then you say, you know what? Well, who knows why? And this, that, and the other. I don't have any thoughts on it. I don't know what to think. And so, to everybody else, when you flip on and flip off with that ability to see the hearts and minds of people, it just seems disingenuous. I don't know if you can understand why, if you're going to allow yourself to see it or admit it, even inside of your own head. But I'm just telling you, to everybody else, there's a reason nobody else is buying it, and it's not because we're not just as educated as you. Okay.
There's a massive difference between someone operating along the pathology of bigotry that has certain markers, certain behaviors, certain phrases you can look for to tell if someone is acting in a bigoted way, or there's patterns to it, and judges on a panel making a decision on something about criteria that none of us know what the criteria is.
All right. Well, I understand your position. You understand mine. We're not going to agree. It's no problem. But we got understanding at least. And a lot of times that's the best we can hope for. The vast majority of people who saw this, just so you know, to sum it up, feel that this person was chosen because they were trans, not because they were the best candidate and not because they were comparable to the other candidates. We will never know the hearts and minds of the judges, right? They're not going to, unless somebody does an expose or writes a story about it or something like that, we're not going to know, right? And you believe that it has nothing to do with the fact that they're trans, that there's a chance that it could be, but it most likely doesn't, right? Okay,
All I
and I
know is we
accept
have
that.
no way of knowing. We have literally no way of knowing, and it's
Right.
not doing
Okay.
anything productive to sit on an app talking about, oh my God, did they pick her because she was
Well,
trans? It's not
well,
like
it's not.
there is
It's really
no
not about
point
the
to it.
beauty pageant.
Let
You know
the
that.
child be happy. Let her be
Hold
happy
on,
doing her
Jane.
thing.
Jane. It's not about the
She won a pageant. Good for her. She's probably not going to win another one. She's probably not going to go to the national
Jane.
level. Let her be
It's
happy with the one that she won.
Jane, you do know that it's not about the person and it's not about the pageant, right? It's about something that everybody else is talking about, that whenever we talk to somebody in your community, we get gaslit about it. And the gaslighting is that no, there is no agenda. No, there is no thing that's happening whatsoever. When people bring up example after example after example, they say, you know what? No, they gaslight you. They say, no, you're being crazy. You're transphobic. That's what the problem is. It's not any of the
You have
shit that is
really
obvious to everybody.
nothing to
It's that
prove
we're going to
anything
gaslight you and
to
tell you that you're crazy or that you don't know that you're a bigot. And so we accept that. But I'm just explaining to you the thought process, because the thought process is what you brought up cultural Marxism, right? It's easy to just call somebody a bigot and then dismiss everything they have to say. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to investigate it. You don't have to see if it has merit. If I can just call you a transphobe, then I don't have to investigate any of your thinking. And oftentimes, when you go into lives and you talk to people who are on the left or liberal leaning, what they do is they call you misogynist, or they call you patriarchal, or they call you this or call you that, and then they don't actually deal with any of your ideas. They just do an ad hominem attack. And that's what
That is,
Marxism is. It's when you group a whole bunch of people so that you don't have to deal with their concepts.
I really, sweetie, we really should not be talking about culture. Like, if you if you are going to try to make some argument that cultural Marxism is a real thing, that's wild to me, because that actually is like that is very, very problematic, and I like, part of me would want to end the conversation there, because that's just,
You brought up cultural Marxism.
yes, I
You
was
said
saying,
that.
what you were saying was alluding to the idea of cultural Marxism, which is a very anti-Semitic, like idea,
Anti-Semitic?
like the concept is anti-Semitic.
No, it's not anti-Semitic. The cultural
Cultural
Marxism doesn't
Marxism is
specifically.
1,000,
Cultural
the idea of
Marxism
cultural
doesn't
Marxism is
specifically deal
1,000%
with people
anti-Semitic.
from. Cultural Marxism does not specifically deal with Arab people or Jewish people.
It literally does.
No,
Cultural
it not. And
Marxism is a descendant of the term cultural Bolshevism, which was a term coined by the Nazis. They were saying Jewish people are trying to influence our cultures. They're trying to like erode our way of life. They're trying to introduce all these liberal ideas to our societies, to ruin our societies. And cultural Marxism is the modern day, what that descended from. That's literally, if you do research on a cultural Marxism, that descends directly from the term cultural Bolshevism, which was an idea that the Nazis pushed. It's a one to one, and I literally can bring up sources on that right now if we needed to.
Okay,
But I
well,
don't want to get in that
okay,
conversation.
Pikachu, where do you stand when it pertaining to competition? Do you think that trans women should be able to compete with women? Do you think trans men should be competing with men, or do you think that they should have their own category? Like, we know about the swimmer, we know about the wrestler. What is your stance on that?
Yeah, I think that there is no scientific consensus or no scientific evidence that trans women after medically transitioning have an advantage to the degree that would justify segregating them from, being able to compete with other women.
Really?
It's not. There's no scientific consensus that shows that.
Really?
mm,
So I'm 6'3". I played basketball all my life. I was an All-American college basketball player. So most women are not 6'3". Most basketball players, most girls are not 6'3". Um, a girl that's even 5'9", 5'10", she's playing a 4 or 5 in basketball. So you're saying that if I just for whatever reason wanted to transition and become a transgender woman, that despite me being a college All-American basketball player playing with men, that I wouldn't really have that much of an advantage, going to play with women.
There is no science. There is no scientific evidence. There is not a scientific consensus that would be the case. No. After transitioning, after you've been on hormones for a year or two, you lose the advantages that you have from testosterone. Your muscles,
You,
your
you got it,
muscles are
Mark.
going to
You
have
got it. You
changed or
got it.
whatever.
I got to step away for a little bit on that one. You got it.
all right. So
Can you
it's
wait?
crazy. I had a.
Can you prove what I'm saying wrong? Can you
All right.
provide
So
evidence of a scientific consensus that is not the case,
all
other than
right.
just
So
common sense? Because if your answer is it's common sense, that is like that's a fallacy.
all right. So I've got actually somebody who's a friend of mine, and they're a trans person, and they used to be an MMA fighter before they decided to transition. And and for me, I met them after transition, right? But I used to fight back in the day. So me and Nikki really, she had to job shadow me when she got hired into the company. we just hit it off because we both could sit up and talk fight. And so we catch lunch together and shit like that, sneak and have margaritas at lunch. And, that turned out into a thing that we do even a couple of times a week. I had a homeboy even that came up to me and was like, bro, like, what's going on between you and Nikki? And I was like, bro, are you out your fucking mind? But it didn't even occur to me that somebody might think I was dating Nikki, or something like that. And I ended up having to clear that up. But my point was that I used to talk to Nikki about fighting, and I was like, have you ever considered getting back in the cage and fighting? And Nikki's like, absolutely not. Nikki's like, no, there's absolutely no way that I get in and fight, natural born women. I've spent the first 25 years of my life, as a man. They don't stand a chance against me. And what the estrogen and stuff has done is it's actually increased my bone density, even though it's made it harder for me to maintain muscle. It's increased my bone density, so my bones are actually more dense than they were before I transitioned. And so no, I have no right. It doesn't make any sense for me to fight women. So that's not a
That's
study
not
or
how
anything
that
like
works.
that. But what you say?
So that's not how that works. So first off,
Oh, that's what Nikki
I
thought.
really don't care what any one individual trans person says on something,
I know.
because
Sure.
again, a trans person can be wrong about even how our biology
Sure.
works. Being trans, transitioning does not mean that you have accurate information from a scientific perspective on how any of that works. So I genuinely don't care what one individual trans person
I
says.
got
But
it.
if
I
you
understand. I
see
know
I
that
see
your evidence
you,
I introduced was
your
anecdotal.
transferring, I see you my transfer. I'm also acquaintances with trans women MMA fighters
And
who fight with cis women. So I
and
literally, if I
Jane,
wanted to reach out to them, I could DM one right now. So like
Jane,
I see
I don't argue that my
listen,
story was anecdotal.
yeah, that's what I'm
I
saying.
don't
It's
argue that my
anecdotal.
story was or
What
anecdotal.
I was extremely articulate with what I said, that there is not a scientific consensus that trans women have an advantage after medically transitioning that would justify them not being able to compete with cis women.
All right,
There's not
so
a scientific consensus on that. If
let
I'm
me
wrong,
ask you a
please
question.
provide evidence.
All right, so what do you do with like the trans woman that was a cyclist that was like 200th or 300th in the world, and then transitioned and then competed against women and then became number one for women in the world. What do you do with like the story of, I forget the trans swimmer's name? Like, what do you do
Leah
with that
Thomas.
when you see those things that's just random to you? You
Leah
put that
Thomas.
in the random box. Yeah, Leah Thomas, you put all of those things in
You
the
do
random box,
No,
right?
you do understand that Leah Thomas, before she started transitioning, was one of the top swimmers, and that after she started transitioning was when she had all those record lows that people like to bring up as like, oh, she was like 800
I know,
in
but
place.
she still beat all
That
the
was
girls.
after she had started estrogen. She was
Yeah,
still
but she still beat all
competing.
the
She
girls
was
because she's
after she
6'3".
was hormonally transitioning. Her
Yeah.
performance tanked after
Pikachu,
she
Mm.
started
All
hormonally
right, but
Pikachu,
transitioning
I get
when
it,
she was competing with them.
I get it, but
Pikachu.
she
Do
still
you
beat
know
all
who
the girls because she
Pikachu? Do
was
you
six
know who
three,
Golden Fox is?
right?
Silent Fox, yeah, she's who I'm talking about. I am mutuals with her on this app. She's
Okay,
we're for like
if I was to with my height and my stature, if I was to transition to a female or to a woman, because you're not well, that person wouldn't be a female. If I was to transition to a woman and start fighting women, not you're saying such and such is not scientifically proven, but you're telling me that I probably wouldn't have an advantage fighting women.
Correct.
I said
That's
there's not
exactly what she's saying.
a consensus that you would have an advantage that would justify not competing. I
Okay.
was
All right.
I'm very explicit with the words I'm using. So we're
Yeah.
gonna
Well,
do it layer by layer. One, scientific consensus. That a scientific consensus is not one study; it is a collection of studies, understanding of like medical information, all of this stuff. So it's not just one individual study; it's a wealth of scientific information that's coming together to make an understanding or a decision on something.
we got
Two,
that.
the second part of what I'm saying is that one, that not only have we not found that there is a definite advantage like consistently, but also even if there is an advantage, we have not come to the determination that that advantage in and of itself is justifiable for people not being able to compete. Because we have all sorts of physical advantages in sports. That's the whole point of sports, is that some people have more physical advantages than others. We have not found, scientifically speaking, or come to a decision that that advantage is justifiable to not let people compete, trans people compete. We
Right,
haven't.
I understand what your point is. Do you find it strange then? Is it does it because basically what you're saying is that if a person who's trans that transitions from male to female, and then they blow all the women out of the water and they were a nothing on the men's side and now they're number one on the woman's side, you're saying that that's random. Okay, I got that. I understand it. I accept it. All right.
I'm not
So
saying that's random. I'm saying that that doesn't happen. So, like the majority of the time, when people like use like Leah Thomas's example, Leah Thomas is not an example of that. She literally
okay,
was the top male competitor. She started hormonally transitioning. Her performance tanked because she was not. She was still competing with cis men while having an estrogen dominant system, and then
right,
she slowed down a whole lot from what she used to be able to do when she used to be a top swimmer. And then when
okay.
she moved into competing with women, she was competing to where she was at before with men, on just estrogen wise.
Right, which means that, yeah, okay, so cool. Yeah, saying she destroyed them. Got it. All
She
right.
did
And
not
then
destroy them. She's lost to cis women multiple times.
she has, but overall she placed number one in like I forget how many events it was on. She
She
only
won,
lost
I
like
think,
two.
like two.
Yeah, she lost like two and won like five. But we don't I don't want to argue that because that's not the point. The point is and I want to ask you about this. So what do you do with the fact that there are absolutely no examples of of women who transition from women to male compete that do absolutely anything? Most of them don't even
That is
qualify to
not true.
compete against men at all. What
Hold
do
on,
you do
that's
with
not
that?
true. Chris Mosier is a trans male athlete that. Hold on, let me find out where he placed. Hold on, let's see. He is.
So Pikachu, you're saying a woman that plays basketball right now, if that
Yeah,
woman was to transition to a man, that she would
yeah.
actually stand she
Chris
would
Mosier
actually stand a chance.
won two national championships in 2019 and won All American honors in a duathlon in 2016. And he is in his like late 30s. He was in his late 30s at that point as a
Okay,
trans man.
Pikachu, let me ask you a question. So
What sports were they?
you know
What sports was he
a
competing in?
woman
He's
can
a triathlon.
transition.
He's a triathlon
Okay,
athlete.
Okay, so like
Pikachu,
running and swimming and all of that stuff.
so you're saying a woman can
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
and a woman transition to a man, and she would actually stand a chance in wrestling, football, basketball, baseball, like track and field. Like she would act that person that used to be a woman would actually stand to be competitive against men.
Again, this is all like being researched currently. We've not like put like massive amounts of research to it. So we don't know all the ins and outs of it yet to try to make claims on what like. But again, there are trans men who compete. There's athletes. There's a trans
All right.
man that I
Well,
follow one here that is a swimmer and documents his like swim meets and stuff like that. And he competes with cis men just like fine. There's the whole there's a wrestler that everyone was trying to say, oh, they thought it was a trans woman who was wrestling against women and beating them when really it was a trans man who was being forced to compete against women and he was beating all of the women that he was competing against. And he wanted to compete with other cis men, but he wanted to compete with cis men, but they're like, oh no, you were born female, so you got to compete with girls, and he was laying them all out.
all right.
So
All right.
that again, this is where it's within misogyny, this idea that like people with female bodies are always inherently going to be weaker than those with male bodies, even when that's not been historically the case. Trans men who transition, I would not put it past them that they can compete and outperform cisgender men. I would
All
never.
right.
I don't.
So I accept what you're saying because what you're telling me is that your standard for belief is data. And that the issue that we have right now is there hasn't been enough data collected to create peer reviewed and what was the other word that you or the other description of data that you
I
used?
said there's not been a scientific consensus.
Yeah, scientific consensus So once there's more information for a scientific consensus, then if that data were to go against the narrative that you accept, you would accept it and say, okay, this is the consensus that scientists have come up with, and this is where we're going to be at. So I personally believe that there's a tide right now that's changing, right? And that there's a lot of folks now who have just really checked out of all of this stuff and trying to do the tolerance game to the extent that we're ignoring reality. And so I think that you're going to start seeing more data that is going to move the needle. I just want to make sure, or I just want and hope that as the needle moves, that the level of tolerance that has been shown from trans people to cis people is not what is shown back, because there is a more dominant group going back the other way in terms of there being so many more people who are cis and heterosexual,
Like,
and that way
that is just
that
blatantly disingenuous to act as though for the past
go ahead.
80 years, cisgender people have been tolerant of trans people and we've just been letting you
I didn't
exist
say
in that.
for the last
Come
80
out
years.
the
I think it's
woodwork
been maybe
using
about the
hindsight
last 25.
when you've actively
I don't
made
think it's been
it
80 years.
illegal.
I think it's been
No,
about
no,
the last
no.
25.
This is actually pissing me off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people have made it illegal to exist as trans people. You've made it punishable by death.
Well, it's not
You've
like
made
that anymore, and I don't have anything to
no,
do
no,
with
no,
that.
but historically that's been the case. So to
I
act
know,
as
but I'm not arguing
you're saying,
history.
oh, I just hope this tide doesn't change because then it's going to be reflected.
No,
It's
I didn't
been
say I
like
hope the
that.
tide doesn't
Cis
change. I
people have
absolutely hope the tide
like
changes.
cis people have
Hold on. You're
treated us
mischaracterizing a whole bunch
horribly
of stuff I'm
for
saying.
a long
Jane,
time, and trans
Jane,
people are not reflecting a fraction of that back at this.
Jane, you're mischaracterizing what I'm saying. I don't think that people have been tolerant of trans people in America over the last 80 years. I think it's maybe max been about the last 25, but really only over about the last 10 to 15 years. Okay, so I don't think it's been 80 years, right? I accept that trans people will always be a part of every single society and culture. The samurai had trans people. Indians have a third gender that they recognize that are trans people. I believe that this is a subset of any group of human beings that will always exist. And if every single one of them, and Thanos came, snapped his fingers, and every single one of them were made to disappear today, then in 10 years there will be more people who fall into this space because there are people who feel this way. Okay, so that I don't think that there's 80 years of history of people being forgiving and patient with trans folks in this country. Like I said, I think it's been maybe 15 to 25 years max. Okay, so I don't think that. And what I am saying is that the way that you talk about folks who are cisgender and heterosexual, stuff like that, where you're like, hey, it doesn't matter, what you think about it. It matters how I feel inside. And if I want to have sex and get off, then I don't have to tell you, because maybe it's just a one-time thing. So that's none of your business, because and so it's that level of one-sided, one-way disregard that I'm talking about, where you say, hey, I'm comfortable to do that because I am siding with the smaller group. And I'm saying that when this ball swings the other way, I hope that it stops in the middle, where we have dignity and respect for everybody. That's what I'm saying. Is that more clear?
I mean, other than the fact you blatantly lied about stuff that I said and like blatantly like lied, like it.
Well, I'm not trying to lie. If I misunderstood you, you're free to
I'm
correct
just
me.
like, this is not even like a genuine
Oh, yeah,
conversation because
I'm
you're
not trying to
actively
lie on you. I'm not trying to lie on you, Jane. You're free to
you
correct
actively
something that I
lied about the
mischaracterized
things
that
I
you
said.
said. Jane, I'm not trying to lie on you. You're free to correct something that I misstate that you
But I've
say.
corrected you
Okay.
more than once about this. I've
What did you say?
specifically said that I never once said that I don't care about cis people's opinion. I never once said that. I said the opposite. I specifically predicated it by I'm not a person who engages in hookups because I'm not built that way. Like, I'm not built where I can enjoy that. I literally said all of that before I laid out my positions. Just because and it's just wild to me that this is being twisted and I'm being said to have said something that I never even said.
Well,
I never
hold on. I'm hold on. If I
I
mischaracterize,
in fact, I've said the opposite. So to
all
keep
right, Jane, if I
twisting what I'm
mischaracterize,
saying into this is wild to me.
hold on,
And this
Jane, if I
is not
mischaracterize,
a conversation
if
where
I
you're trying to even like have that you're trying to position like push a
not
narrative, but not actually like understand what I'm saying.
Jane, if I mischaracterized what you said, I apologize. I took that from when you said earlier that if I'm just trying to have a hookup, I don't need to tell somebody. Now, I also remember you saying that that you don't hook up, you're not built that way. But then later on in conversation, maybe you weren't talking about yourself. Maybe you were just justifying people who do some hookup shit and then say, "Hey, I don't have to tell you my medical history just because I want to get my rocks off." I believe those were the exact words you used. So
I'm
that's
talking.
what I was referring to. But I also recognize and accept that you did say you personally don't behave that way and you don't do hookups. Okay. But I'm just saying that when you said that somebody not saying something, that to me is condoning them not doing it because you said that you understood it. And then when I asked you why is that okay, what I got from what you said was, hey, I'm going to side with a smaller group because they're working against a group that's more dominant and more powerful. So if you don't want to say it because of what's going on inside of you, then you shouldn't have to say it, right? So to me, that's caring about what's going on inside of your heart and mind, and not your potential partners. That's one way of placing value on one person's feelings and not the other. So that's why I said that. I wasn't trying to be disingenuous. Do you understand how I could have saw it that way now that I've explained myself?
That may be your perspective on that, but that's not the case. You can care about someone else's feelings, thoughts, motivations, and still say, yeah, I have to side this way to protect somebody. Like, that's like saying, like, a woman who's in a situation where she's being abused by her husband, and she might understand that if she leaves him, it's going to leave him devastated. He might self harm himself or whatever. She might understand and empathize with that, but at the end of the day, she has to protect herself and maybe any other children that she has. Just because you make a decision that causes someone else discomfort or sadness or whatever does not mean you don't care about that person's sadness or discomfort. But there may be other reasons that are more important to you and to your own survival, your own
Well, I think the
autonomy,
best.
whatever it is that cause you to prioritize that. That doesn't mean you don't care about their feelings or their opinions.
All right, so let me ask you this. If trans people only slept with people who wanted to have sex with trans people, would any of this even be an issue?
No, it would still be an issue because there are
Okay.
trans people who disclose the fact that they're trans from the very beginning, have sexual relationships with people, and still are harmed by those same people
Okay. Right. Right. Okay.
because
Do
our
you?
society
Mhm.
has so much transphobia embedded within it that even people who are genuinely attracted to trans people are a lot of times ashamed of the fact that they're attracted to trans people and cause them
Mhm.
bodily harm when other people find out that they're attracted to trans people. So even when you're
This-
1000% transparent with somebody, that is not a guarantee that you're not going to be harmed by
Well,
them.
I think I
Pikachu,
get I
Pikachu,
get that.
Pikachu.
Hold on. Let me make this one point, Noble. Let me make this one point, and then I'll yield to you. When men have intercourse with women, there are some women who don't disclose that they have venereal diseases, and that causes them problems. When there are some women who have sex with men, they don't disclose that they have venereal diseases, that causes a problem. There's some women who have sex with men who it becomes an SA situation. And that's a problem, right? There's a risk involved with sex, right? And so if trans people are having sex with folks who want to have sex with trans people and then it turns into something violent or shitty, then that sucks and I don't want that to happen. But they are being exposed to a different form of risk, but the same relative risk as everybody else, because I don't think
Not
that
the same
you're
relative
saying,
risk.
well, let me land a point. Let me land a point. I don't think that you're people who knowingly look for trans people to have sex with and then turn around and commit acts of violence against them. I don't think that's the majority of trans
It is.
sex acts.
It is.
Are you saying that you think that represents a large
The,
percentage of trans sex acts, that this
the
happens
majority, the
to a large
majority,
percentage of these people?
the majority of violence that happens to us with intimate partner violence is from people who know that we're trans ahead of time. A lot of times have seeked us out specifically because the majority of times if you are having interactions with people and they know that you're trans right away, a lot of those interactions are coming from people seeking you out. And I know that
Okay,
from just
I get. Okay,
as
so I get that, but you seem like a college educated person. You seem like you're very intelligent. So there's a statistic that is very popular that's been used in the media. Is that 86% of black people are killed by other black people. Right now, that statistic alone makes it seem like Black people are hyper violent and they're killing one another all the time. And then if you ask about white on white crime, you find out that 83% of white people kill other white people, and that murder is a crime of proximity, so that people who are close together, they tend to murder each other, right? And that typically means the same cultures, or male to female, right? White men murder a lot of white women, right? Black men murder a lot of Black women. This is not something that is specific to anybody's culture. It's something that, but when you frame it that way, so but the vast majority of Black men are not murderers, right? Less than 5% of Black men are in jail, period, at all, out of the 19 million Black men, almost 20 million Black men that there are in America. So when you talk about the fact that so many of the cases of violence, right, you're talking about a percentage of the cases of violence, not that as a total percentage of the amount of sex that's happening in a trans community. This may be less than 1% of interactions. So to pretend as if this is some driving problem that is getting trans people unalived at some super high rate without the context of the fact that this might be 1 in 10,000 people or 1 in 100,000 people who are having sex or sex acts that result in violence in a trans community. If we just looked at how many times there was violence in a trans community and said, oh, okay, well, 80% of these happen because of this particular thing, but then we ignore the fact that in the total acts of violence are only 0.001% of sex acts, is kind of disingenuous. It reframes the point in a way where it makes it seem like trans folks are just being exposed to violence every time that they have sex by people who want to
That's
have sex with them and then are turning around and beating them up. And I don't think that that's the majority of trans sex.
that's
Is
not what I
that
was
what you're
saying.
saying that it is?
No, I was you.
Okay.
From what I understood of what you were saying, I thought you were saying the majority of times when violence happens to trans people, it's because they haven't disclosed that they're trans. And I was saying, no, that's not the case. If you're talking about like trans people having interactions with like sex as a whole, I don't really know how to quantify that because like
Okay,
how
let
would
me
you
dig into. Dig into. Let
I'm
me
not
ask you a
putting that
question.
burden on you.
Question.
That'd
Dig
be
into.
ridiculous for me to ask that question. I
So
know
dig
that
into.
isn't
Let
something
me ask you
anybody can
a question.
figure out.
So you have situations like Hennessy Marie. Why do people in your community, why, if when they're dealing with people that are knowingly and like openly dealing with them, even I won't use the word openly, but people that are, portray themselves to be straight, but they hook up with people in your community on the down low. Why do you have people like Hennessy Marie, and not just Hennessy Marie, because there's been a lot of other people that have done it and do it. Why do you guys like out those men? Why, like, what's the whole point of outing those men?
That's a very complex conversation. There's several reasons why people may do that. Like, so this is actually something that a cis woman said to me when we were talking about the conversation. She was saying that she understood completely why she felt like Hennessy did what she did because she said that she's like if I was in a position where I was like in a public sphere and I had interactions with men who might want me dead, if I think I'm going to have some type of bodily harm that's going to happen to me, I'm putting everybody's business out in the street. She's like, I'm going to list all the potential people who, if I go missing, you need to check these people out. And so she was saying that she felt like there is a potential that she may have done what she did because she wanted to cover herself, where if something violent happens to her, we have a list of suspects we can go down now. That was a perspective I had not even thought about before. There are times where I would say the one that strikes for me the most, and I would think of as most like as a trans person specifically, is the way in which we we dehumanize trans women so much. We strip trans women of their womanhood and their humanity so much in our society that there are times where trans women attempt to weaponize the transphobia and homophobia that have been directed towards them against men who hurt them. Uh, so I think that it can be something that happens. I think that there's a possibility that sometimes trans women, especially from my understanding, I've seen like more younger trans women do this, to be honest, where because again, it's like, yeah, you're saying I'm not a woman, but see, I have evidence because I have all, because that's what it is. Like in our society, this again goes back to misogyny. A lot of these things go back to misogyny. In our society, women's value is placed like women's value is determined by how men interact with them. If men want you, that adds value, quote unquote, to you as a woman. So there are some times where trans women, because of the fact that society is always constantly invalidating our womanhood, taking our womanhood away from us, saying we're not women, in an attempt to validate their womanhood in society, will say, like, yeah, like, look at all of these men who want me. That has to, like, don't you understand that that shows like a level of me being a woman? And like, yeah, that there's issues with that. That's not like how as women we have, that's not where our womanhood like truly comes from. But that is an issue with society treating people in a certain way and then reacting to it in a negative way. But that's not just like trans women's fault for that.
All
That's a
right, so
large
you described
issue.
it. You described a circumstance in which the trans person would be kind of like the victim of circumstance in society. Do you think there are also circumstances where there are trans people who just kind of weaponize the fact that you've done something with them, you thought it was private, and then what they do is they are using that to kind of blackmail you or get you back for not wanting to be in the type of relationship with them that you want. Do you think that happens as well?
I don't think it's about not. I don't think it would be from the sense
Do
of
you
like
think
not.
that happens?
You know what I'm saying? I'm going to clarify. I don't think it's from the sense of like, oh, you don't want to be with me, so I'm going to weaponize this. I don't think it's like necessarily that specifically. But are there messy girls? Yes, there's most definitely messy girls who want to sleep,
Okay.
who like sleep with people and then just be revealing people's business. But that's literally with anyone. There was literally that lady who came on here and said, so talked about how she had slept with Adam Levine. She was being a messy girl. We all know like she was doing that for the attention, for the clout. That's a thing that people do. Is it healthy? No. Is it something we should have conversations about how we shouldn't be doing it? Yes. But like that's not unique to trans women. That is just a societal issue that people like to be messy and people like to have attention. So
Right.
yeah, I
So
do
I
think
think that
that times.
all right. So yeah, I think that absolutely happens at times as well. I think that if you're somebody in the community, you probably think it happens a whole lot less than somebody outside of the community, right? And if you're somebody like
I think
myself,
it
you
happens with
probably think it
young
happens a
trans
whole
women.
lot more. I'm sorry, what did you say? I was still
I
talking, so I
think that
didn't hear
happens
you.
a lot with young trans women when they're first into their transition because they're navigating. They're very young and they have not got the maturity for how to navigate interactions. So I do believe that that happens like majority more. Like I've seen that type of thing happen. I see a lot of times YouTubers are the ones that are doing it. Young trans women YouTubers who have the gossip channels and the vlogs and all that kind of stuff because that feeds into their brand. They're out there feeling themselves and they're coming into their own. But to act as though this is some large scale community issue is just not true.
All right, so I get what you're saying. I don't think it's a large scale community issue, but I think when it happens, I think it's more of that than it is what you described. But I accept what you described can represent a percentage of these instances as well, right? We arguing about whether or not it's a minority or a majority might be difficult to prove, but I'm just saying that it's something that happens. And I also, when we talk about these things, right? We don't end up talking about them as messy. Instead, we want to make sure that we're that they're being protected. So and this happens with women often, right? As well, where cis women, right, or women who are natural born women are being are weaponized the desire of society to try to protect women, and they end up weaponizing their victimhood against men, like the Johnny Depp case, right? So there's stuff that happens inside of the trans community against folks who are outside of the trans community in that way as well. And one of the things that I think to tie it all back is that you have men who don't want to deal with trans women. They don't, that's not what they're interested in. They don't want to deal with the lifestyle. If they find out that a woman is trans woman, even though they might present as a beautiful woman, to them, that would be a disqualifying aspect for them. And you've got all of these lives online where you're watching people have this conversation that if you don't want to be with a trans woman, then you're a transphobic. And that's why you don't want to be with them, as if men can't even have a preference to not want to date or be with or have sex with trans women without being labeled transphobic. And so these conversations to normal or to cisgendered men, I'm trying to use a term that you, because I don't even like the term cis, but to natural born men, these conversations to us seem like you're trying to, not you, but folks who are doing this are trying to force people by virtue signaling that, hey, if you don't want to have sex with us and date us and marry us, then that's because you're a bigot. And a lot of people, I think, are getting sick of that bullshit.
You have any rebuttal to that, Pikachu?
I mean, I'm really not sure what my response is. I'm not really sure what he wants me to respond to out of that whole thing. Is he asking me my opinion on that, or?
Like you said,
So I
and
guess I guess a question would be, do you believe that men who don't want to date trans women are transphobic, or can they just have a preference to want to date natural born women?
I genuinely don't think that anyone here has the. I don't think that the majority of people in this space are capable of having a nuanced conversation about this, and because we're not past, we have not been able to get to the point of whether or not trans women are women. And if we can't work past that, we cannot get into deeper, more complex subjects about stuff like that. Like that, there's no point. I feel like there's not a point in me having that conversation because we are not going to be able to meet. Like if we can't meet
can you please
on
answer his
the most
question?
like
Can you please
basic
answer
part
his
of it, how
question
can we
and
get
then
to
go on? Because this is what you did last time too. You weren't answering my question. Just answer his question and then go on with your soliloquy. Just answer his question first.
that's what I'm saying. Like that's a whole different that's a whole deep conversation. That if we can't agree if trans women are women, how are we gonna have that conversation?
So you
I'm
don't
just
answer the
asking you.
question.
I'm just asking you. Can men have a preference to not want to date trans women without being
No
transphobic, or
question.
is anybody who doesn't want to date a trans woman also a transphobic?
I will answer it this way. I
Okay.
believe that anyone who had that pre-decides that a demographic of people is unsuitable for them as a partner based off of intrinsic properties before they've interacted with them, that is rooted in prejudice.
All right. So let's say then that you have a man who's not attracted to tall women, right? Because you used tall women as an example before. He's not attracted to tall women. He doesn't want them, right? So is he, what is he, ableist or some shit like that? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, no, there's not a term for prejudice against tall people.
Yeah, okay, but
I
whatever. Is he prejudiced against?
depending on what he says, it may be rooted in misogyny. Like for instance, if he's like, "Oh yeah, I don't want to date a tall woman because they're too masculine," or "I would feel like less of a man next to them." There's things he could say that could be rooted in misogyny, but there's not a
All right,
particular prejudice against tall people that would just be like, "Oh,
all
it's
right.
tall people." That's not a thing.
All right, so let's say that a woman says she doesn't want to date a man who's shorter than her because she doesn't feel like he can protect her. She feels like she can beat him up. Would that mean that it's rooted in misandry?
I would say that position would be rooted in misogyny. That's some internalized misogyny, and I've had conversations with some women in my life that are like, "Oh yeah, like I don't want to date a tall man because they're not as masculine or whatever," and I'm like, "Yeah, you do understand that's rooted in misogyny." And we've had
All right,
conversations
so
about that. Yeah, no, that's definitely,
all right,
and that's
so
coming from a person who used to be in that position. Like I used to be like, "Oh, I don't want to date short men," and then I was like, "Wait, why is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's
because you're
because."
not attracted to him.
Well, I mean, yeah, I wasn't attracted to them, but I wasn't attracted to them because they were I felt as though they were not as masculine because to be
So,
masculine is to be big, it's to be tall, it's to be this, to be that. And I realized, I'm like, oh crap, that's literally misogyny.
all right,
And
but
then
if
I
that's
also just experienced the fact that I've met short men. I'm like, oh yeah, like no, you're really attractive.
right, but
Deconstructing my
I'm just saying, I'm saying that I believe that the argument that is actually being had is trying to force men who don't want to engage with trans women to engage with them. And if you don't want to engage with them, we feel you're diminishing our the narrative that we have about ourselves and our identity. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to character assassinate you by turning you into a bigot. That's what people outside of it experience it as,
Mhm.
right? And all these conversations that are having about all of these incredibly nuanced arguments, where the only people who are qualified to hand out terms like misogyny and internal misogyny and all toxic masculinity and all of this stuff are women and people who are in the LGBT spectrum, or folks who are feminists. And if you aren't a feminist, if you're not in the spectrum, if you're not one of the folks who are on the left, then it's like you aren't even allowed to use these terms or question them. People act like you don't understand them. And every person that's on the left acts like
If
they've
you,
got a woman's studies degree. It just
if you
comes off as a whole bunch of bullshit, you
No,
know?
this is the thing. How can you have a conversation on things like how can you have a conversation about what is bigoted or what's not bigoted or prejudice if you are not a person who is in any way, shape, or form in the sphere of social activism? Like you keep saying, like that's like me as a person saying, "Oh my God, it's not fair. Astrophysicists are the only ones who come up with terms like around like general relativity." And it's not fair to me because I am a regular person. Why should I have to be an astrophysicist to coin terms about space? Because I don't study the thing. If you don't study the thing, if you have no expertise and no interest in the thing, how can you speak
Well,
from authority on any of it? So
well,
yeah, if you're
I
not a feminist, if you're not somebody who is actively trying to, if you're not someone who does anti-racism work, if you're not an LGBT activist, if you're not a person who studies the forms of oppression in our society, to understand how they work and how they interact with each other and stuff like that, how do you have any bandwidth to have conversations and determine what is or isn't prejudice if you don't study these things?
I think that's a fair assessment, and I understood your example. However, people who are in the activist space aren't the only people who understand these concepts and ideas. And unfortunately, when people are talking about this stuff, that's the way that it's treated, because just because somebody is trans doesn't make them an expert on misogyny and doesn't make them an expert on racism or any of that shit. And so when people try to have these conversations with folks and they act like they're the only person who has an understanding or a right to talk about any of these things, and that because you aren't gay, you can't say anything about any of this. As a black man, I'm going to tell you, like when I watch black people do this shit to white folks, as if you're not black, you can't have any observation about the black community that makes any sense whatsoever, and you just don't understand. So you have no right to speak on it. So shut up. So what that does is just shuts down the conversation from the people that you need to understand. Because you're saying, if you don't want to listen to me and take my word for it, then there is absolutely nothing that you have to add to the conversation. And
This,
unfortunately, human beings don't want to operate that way, and they're not. So I
right.
think that it limits your ability to have this conversation and move forward your agenda when the only ideas that you think are valid enough to consider are your own.
But that it's not about it being my own. It's about people having experience and education on things. And that's the thing. It's like, again, I'm going to use my astrophysicist thing. If we're having a discussion about astrophysicists, my uneducated, non-degreed in astrophysicist ass opinion has no weight in a conversation about those things. Yes, I am welcome to give it. That doesn't mean it's needed. That does not mean that should be the focal point or that people should be spending a lot of time on that. Because when you're in that kind of space, You are there to be educated. And if you're not coming into spaces with people who are more educated than you, seeking education, but you're seeking to tell them information about your perspectives on these things that require education and experience, why should they waste energy on you? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, imagine I have a room full of astrophysicists, and I'm like, no, I think we should be naming this thing this, and this thing that, and this thing this, and this thing that. And I want to act like my opinions on this are just as valid as their years of research and data. That's ridiculous. And so that's what's happening with these conversations. It's not saying that you're not open to your own opinion or your own belief. What we're saying is that when you're interacting with people who have the lived experience, who have the education, the understanding, you should
Yeah,
be there
well,
to learn and not there to try to teach them on their own experiences.
yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not trying to talk about the lived experiences of somebody else. The right to call somebody a misogynist or whatever anytime that they aren't a feminist is what everybody else is experiencing, essentially. That if you don't agree with feminist ideology, then that means you're a misogynist. And I'll tell you what it's actually
If
been
you're not
doing to the
pro equality for
conversation.
women, how
Hold
is
on,
that not
hold on.
misogyny?
Hold on 1 second. I don't want to miss what you just said, but I was making a point. So please don't forget what you just said. Okay. All right. So what ends up happening is that in the same way as a black man, right? When I hear something fucked up happens to somebody who's a racist, right? I'm like, well, like I heard recently that there was some white folks who showed up that were armed at like a 14-year-old black girl's birthday party, on some racial shit. And then they got like 27 years in jail. I was like, well, yep, too bad, so sad, motherfucker. Don't care. Right. And so what's happening now is people who are on the feminist and LGBTQ side, right? They look at people who aren't feminists the same way that black folks look at racists. They don't care to have a respectful dialogue with you. They easily dismiss you. They call you out your name. They're quick to call you a misogynist and this, that, and the third, and then cast you out. There's absolutely no difference in the way that they approach heterosexual people than the way that they approach or heterosexual people who are not feminists than the way that they approach that white supremacists are approached by black people, right? And
I
so
think
because of that, and so because they have done that, and the vast majority of people don't agree with their thinking, they've set themselves at odds with most folks, and think that the reason that they are at odds with most folks is because people have internalized misogyny and hate them and don't think they have a right to exist. When really it's that you're not open to not you, but they're not open to dialogues. They assume that they're experts just because they're gay or just because they're on the spectrum. And they have these super disingenuous bullshit conversations where they just name call people who don't agree with them. So that's what a lot of folks, just so you know, I don't know if you know this because you're kind of on the inside looking out. This is what a lot of people on the outside looking in are experiencing. And it's a big reason the conversations go absolutely nowhere in the public sphere.
it goes back to what I said. That's literally the case with every liberation movement. Every liberation movement has had that same issue where the people who are trying to be liberated are like, yeah, we kind of need the majority to shut up for a bit and let us talk, explain what was going on to us, and listen and just follow directions because we understand how this all works because that's also part of the nuance of it is that being part of an oppressed group, you have a better perspective on how the oppressor works than the oppressor has on themselves because the oppressing group, the society is often built in a way for the oppressing group to be able to function like it's normal. They view themselves as the standard and everything else is deviant to them. And because of that, they don't take time to analyze things. Whereas the oppressed group spends a lot of time observing the oppressor and figuring out what makes them tick. So they usually have more information on how the nuance of that is what it works, which is the reason why some of the best works on how like gender works like as a concept have been women because women exist at the intersection of being oppressed by men in society for centuries, decades and centuries. And so because of that, they've been able to sit and with time and they've been able to sit and figure out what is it about the interactions that are happening. Same thing with queerness. A lot of the best works on like sexuality and understanding like how sexuality and gender works have come from queer people because of the interaction. Same thing with race. the best dissections of what race is and how the power dynamic works have come from Black people, because we have a unique perspective on how the system works because it affects us.
I understand everything that you just said. I just don't think that the reason that the best material comes from the group is just because of that. I think that a big portion of it is because anybody who doesn't agree with the narrative is just put in the racism box, or they're put in the transphobe box, or they're put in a box and everything that they're said, and there's no even attempt to understand it. But you guys keep running it the way that you want. I mean, it's not my fight, right? So, I mean, you're going
That's
to get what comes with
like
it,
I've
you
been
know.
here for 2 hours now having a conversation where I have,
All right, I
been
know, but I've
the
separated you
entire
from the
space
movement,
of
man.
explanations gave it. Like that's what I'm saying. To say that there's not people out there doing the work to actively try to educate people, to try to understand new perspectives, try to bridge those gaps, is again just disingenuous.
All right, I get what you're saying. I've separated you from the movement over and over again throughout the this dialogue, and the reason that I've done that was because of how differently the experience I've had has been with you. What oftentimes people see is that when folks are having their lives and inviting people up to debate topics around intersectionality, trans rights, and all of these different things, that if you disagree, they just end up reporting your page. Somebody in the comment section just reports your page, and then people in the comment section are just rude and nasty to you, and it's that and the other if you don't agree with everything that's been said. In the same way that some people in the comment section here have been rude and nasty to you, maybe not understanding everything that you said. And so I get what it is that you're saying. I just don't think that if you're not in a position of power, and the power that you are going to use to leverage what it is that you want is coming from tolerance and patience from the other side, then it would make sense that you would want to hear what their thinking is, instead of telling them sit down and shut up and we're going to tell you how this works. So
I
I don't know. That's my opinion. Maybe I
like
don't know shit.
that again. I think what would be imperative is to do more, is to do research into liberation movements and how they work, because liberation movements have always, went through the period of time where they're like, oh, if we just ask nicely for our rights, they'll be given to us. We'll get the equal treatment. If we just perform in this certain way, we will be treated well in society. And then that didn't happen. So the only way that people have had liberation has always been, sorry, the weather in my area is like, it's popping off. Um, but liberation movements have always had to be forceful at some point to be able to get what the rights and the equity that they desire. And it sucks that it has to be that way. It'll be really nice. Are you fucking kidding me? Come on. It would be really nice if we didn't have to do that to be able to have equal rights, but that's just not, like, literally no liberation movement has able to just been coast off of, oh, can you please give us rights from the majority?
All right. Well, I mean, women's rights, that's something that women, like when I hear women talk about it, they say that they're like, it's something that they fought for. But in my opinion, it's something that they advocated for themselves to have, but you didn't fight because you didn't have to enter any type of engagement where you beat somebody and won. You just asked for stuff, made your points, and then you stayed on your topic, you raised money, you did all types of stuff like that, and that's how you ended up getting it done. But the reason you got it done is because of the patriarchal system that you're complaining about working
No,
within it.
there were
The
definitely violent. There were definitely,
not violent in any significant manner that
yeah,
men cared
there
about
have
that moved the
definitely
needle.
been violent feminist movements that definitely rose up and had violence involved with them.
Yeah, I know, but it just didn't mean shit
I
because at
can't
the
look
end of the
at
day, they're just women.
that because of the power, but
Yeah, I get it, but just at the end of the day, it didn't mean anything. That's not what moved the needle at all. You
mm,
know,
I would heavily disagree with that. Mm.
I'm sure you would, but that doesn't change my opinion on it because none of that the violence moves the needle because at the end of the day, you're dealing with a dominant force, right?
Not every, but the dominant force has always had to be. Oh, thank you, Mansa Musa. the dominant force has always had to be swayed through like violent uprising at some point. Like I'm not aware of a liberation movement that just was peaceful completely the way through and got equal equality within society.
All
And
right.
that
Well,
includes the civil rights movement.
all right. Well, I say, hey, like for me, I'm satisfied with the conversation that we've had up to this point. Uh, I, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning where I am at. I'm grateful to you. I'm thankful to you that you took the time to have the amount of dialogue that I did. I know that a lot of my ideas are considered offensive by people that are on your side of the fence. To me, a lot of the ideas you guys have are offensive, as well. But I mean, maybe that's because I'm ignorant. Maybe that's because you're ignorant. Maybe there's some truth neither one of us know that is going to be revealed as we get more studies around all of this stuff to figure out what is up and what is down now that we've decided that male and female are just conceptual, right? And that's where our society has evolved to. So I think that we'll see, and everybody's along for the ride. I know that God has tasked me with trying to treat everybody with as much respect and dignity as possible. That doesn't mean I have to believe what you believe. That means that I have to respect your right to life, and I have to want you to be able to live with as much opportunity as I live with. And so that's what I try to do, despite the fact that there are lots of ideas you have that I just fundamentally disagree with and don't accept. And I understand that that's not good enough to the vast majority of people in the trans community. And to that, I say big whoop, but,
Hold on, wait. But isn't that exactly what you accused me of? You said I
um,
didn't care about the perspectives of that, like by me saying, "Hey, I get where you're coming from, but because this is a threat to safety, or this is that, like, this is more pressing." That you said by me saying that, I'm saying I don't care about the perspectives of those people, but you're literally saying you don't care about the
no,
perspectives of
I
trans
don't.
people.
Hold on. As
Like,
it
hey, this
pertains,
is not
hold on.
enough.
As it pertains to a threat to safety, you probably won't find very much disagreement between you and I. Right? I do think that I do understand that there are people who are violent towards trans folks, and I do believe that trans folks need to do what they can do to try to protect themselves. And I do think that if people attack trans people, it should be a hate crime. However, if you're
That's
a
not
trans
addressing what
person,
I'm saying.
I'm sorry, what you say?
I said that's not addressing what I said.
Okay, well, I'm just saying what it is that I am saying is that for me, at this point, based off the information I have, these are the ideas I have. I invited you to send me more information so that I could review it because I told you that if you give me good data, my mind can move. But I need better data than what it is that I have. If you want to give me an author to read from, I'm reading 8 different books right now. A ninth one would not matter to me. I'd be happy to consume new information. At the very least, even if I didn't agree, I'd be better equipped to have these conversations in the future. So I have no problem with you referring information to me. And I said, if you want to take the time to do that, by just giving me an author's name to look up or read, or a book's name that you think I should read, that I would be happy to do that so I could be more educated.
I
Right?
mean, I could follow you and I'll DM you some
I would
resources.
really
I don't
appreciate
like
that.
it's not going to necessarily be an author. It's going to be like scientific papers and stuff like that.
I'm fine with that too. I just followed you so that you can DM me, and like I said, my mind is malleable, and at the very least, I'll be able to further substantiate my thinking if I do read it and find my thinking is correct. But if I find my thinking is wrong, I'm not going to propagate knowingly propagate information that is wrong. And if I try to do what is consistent with the best data that I have available to me. But I have learned to be cynical about data as well, as you well know, right? Everybody has to be that way if you don't look at the information that you're getting and where it comes from. But that doesn't mean it still isn't good to know if an ideal set, is built off of it. So in any way, in any event, I'm willing to consume the information, evaluate it, and hopefully you won't mind if I ask you questions or something like that or reach out to you. But again, I just wanted to thank you for the time that you spent trying to explain things to me.
You're very welcome. That's
All
why
right. Awesome.
I dedicate a lot of my time to try to educate people about queer topics, and I also talk about when I'm in other spaces. I talk about racism a lot too, but I don't feel like that's something that everyone here is ignorant on. So, but
Closing words, Pikachu.
yeah, I think a lot of people have perceptions of trans people that are just not accurate. I think that people don't understand us. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. Just like with transphobia has a long history within our country of being something that's been propagated for a long time, and it lives within the collective consciousness of people. And so we're working against like so many pre what's the word, primed biases against trans people that it's just a lot of work to do. Um, I mean, it's something that hopefully we can get more progress on, but I'm becoming less hopeful just because I can see the political climate is starting to try to weaponize and portray the queer community, specifically trans people, as being groomers, and we're starting to see rising violence against queer people. I don't have a lot of faith in humanity that humanity is going to win out and do the right thing, because humanity tends to not do the right thing. So I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you for coming here on my platform again and having a conversation. Same way, I respectfully disagreed with a lot, damn near everything you said last time. It's the same thing here, but it's okay. I like, we're growing at the end of the day. I don't have a problem agreeing to disagree, and I don't have a problem respectfully disagreeing with people. So thank you for coming back on and having this conversation with Marty and myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, you have a good you have a good day.
Thank you, you as well.
All right, Marty, closing words.
There's a war in the mind right now in this country for a territory. And in that war of the mind, it is a philosophical debate primarily. And what you find is that the data that is sent to you, because I've requested data pertaining to these types of things, I understand intersectionality. I understand, the difference between gender and sex and how these things have been delineated in the last, 2.5 decades. Really, like it started before that, but essentially the science, not the scientific, but the community of academia, not the scientific community, has been in lockstep with this narrative, for the last 20 years now, and incredibly more so in the last decade. And I think that there's a larger agenda to it, but that's something that I'm not even comfortable sharing what I believe that agenda is online, because I don't want to be deplatformed. And I think that a lot of folks who are trans are pawns in that. I don't think that they're kings or queens that are moving around the chessboard and stuff like that. And that's why it was important for me to let her know that I was going to continue to separate her from the things that I thought were negative about the movement, because I'm not going to try to make every trans person responsible for stuff that I don't like in the trans movement any more than I would want people to make me responsible for everything they don't like that America does, just because I'm American that loves my country. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything we do ain't good and everything we do ain't right, but this is still my country, right? So I tried to make sure that I extended that same grace to her. But at the end of the day, I'm willing to use folks' pronouns because I believe in civility and respect, but I'm not using people's pronouns because I believe that you can feel on the inside that you're a different gender, and then that be, what makes you that different gender. I don't think you can take pills to change your gender. I don't think you can have surgeries to change your gender and cut off your body parts, or to have something built onto you. I don't think that you can put on different clothes to change your gender. I think that sex and gender for human beings works the way that it does for the vast majority of the animal kingdom. And we are not one of the sentient species that's put on this earth that is able to flip back and forth between genders, like, hyenas, or a couple of different fish that live at the bottom of the ocean. Right. I don't think that human beings are capable of doing that. So I don't accept the ideology. But the thing is noble. Like, I accept that I am not here to try to diminish people as human beings. And I don't believe that I have to accept how you feel about how you think gender works for you to have equal value as a human being to me, to Noble, or to or to somebody else in my life who doesn't think like you, right? I don't think that it diminishes your human value to have this idea set any more than if you were Muslim or if you are a Buddhist, that I would think you are a lesser person because you aren't a follower of Christ, right? So that's the way that I look at those folks. I look at them as people who have a different idea set, that are encapsulated underneath the umbrella of a larger movement, and that larger movement has more sinister designs for all of us than what they are telling us up front. And ultimately, I think that the pendulum is beginning to swing back the other way. Enough people are saying, "Hey, enough of this shit." And what I want to happen is when it does swing the other way and they stop trying to peddle and push this stuff every time you turn on a television or your kids go to school, when they stop that, that it stops, it swings back to the extent that there is still dignity and respect for people in the trans community to be able to lead full and happy lives where they aren't being diminished at all by us as a group of people, while simultaneously they're not trying to propagate their ideologies into our children. So I think ultimately that's what is going to end up happening, that the pendulum will swing back the other way. If this society is going to save itself, part of it will be us, normalizing or getting back to a more, not normal, getting back to a more equal standpoint where they aren't impressing themselves on the greater society. Because the truth of the matter, like I said, and I was doing this research earlier today, there's about 333 million Americans in the country, of which people who identify as LGBTQIA represent about 4.2%. It's about 4.6% in the Black community, which is, or 4.8% in the Black community, which is higher than everybody else's. Next is Asian at 4.6%. And the greater community, like I said, across the country is 4.2%. So that's LGBTQIA. That's the whole diaspora of people who fall within the gender and sex uh, um, and queer spectrum, right? And then of that 4.2%, even smaller percentage of them are underneath the T in the LGBTQ, right? And so you're talking about people wanting to change the way that the entire country uses gendered language based off of 2 million Americans. 333 million Americans need to talk differently just in case there's somebody around them, one of those 2 million Americans around them, that could be offended. And the reason that we need to do this is because if you don't, that person may unalive themselves at some point because they don't feel accepted enough, as if, and I think that's ridiculous, in my opinion. I think that's a ridiculous reasoning. I think that they're trying to sell us an idea that doesn't make sense for the group, when it comes to how to make space for people that we do need to make space for, because they aren't going anywhere. Gay people are always going to exist. LGBTQIA folks are always going to exist. They always have. You can go back 1,000 years. There were men who had sex with other men in Greece. In Rome, there was pederasty. It isn't fair to conflate them with pederasty, because pederasty was dealing with children, but there were tons of different types of sexuality going back thousands and thousands of years. Ever since recorded human history, a man has put his penis in everything he possibly can, and women have stuck everything in their vagina that they can possibly fit in there, going back, to the beginning of human history, right? So I don't. I'm not somebody who believes or behaves or acts like gay people, or people who are in the LGBTQIA space shouldn't exist, and we shouldn't be holding space for them as human beings, as part of God's creation. However, my 9-year-old daughter, I don't want you trying to talk to her about her sexuality. I don't even let her pick what she's going to fucking have for breakfast. I don't want you telling her she can pick her gender. I don't believe the world operates that way. So if that's what you believe, that's fine. Tell your kids that shit. Leave my kids out of it.
I appreciate you, Marty. Listen, thank you for staying up here and having the conversation with Pikachu. This is the second time this happened. I just this was God's plan. I happened to see Pikachu in the chat. I was like, come up here, let's do this again. This man would be a great person for you to talk to. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you staying up here and having a conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I like having these debates if I can have them without getting reported or banned or anything like that. I enjoy a good debate, and I like people who, have some information and can talk intelligently about their points and then share some information because at the very least, I'll be able to argue my point more effectively if you show me what you've been reading. And I don't think that I don't think anybody is equipped to argue a position that they can't argue both sides of. So if you're, if I wanted to, all the stuff that I say about women, I could take on the feminist argument and tell you all the reasons that feminists say the things that they say about men and dating relationships and marriage and all of these different things. I had to learn their talking points and what they say and why they say what they say for me to be able to figure out what was actually right or wrong about it and deconstruct it and then develop a position on it. Anybody who accepts that something is right without using their own mind to critically think about the information that's used to support whatever premise it is that you choose to take, that to me is ignorance. You're a sheep. You're a bot. That's why when I make references to data, statistics, and facts, I always tell people, look the shit up. Don't trust me. Just go and look the shit up. Here's what you need to Google if you want to look it up. And right now, I've been posting information on my page of debunking myths about black folks. So, that myth that they say that 80% of black men have kids. I pulled the report from the census that our women use to say that 80% of us have children and did a breakdown to explain exactly why this is saying. It's not saying that 80% of us have children. It's saying 80% of men between this age and this age, and those men only represent this portion of black men. So this is actually only like fucking eight out this is only actually like 8 out of freaking 30 guys, right? And so I go through a breakdown. I did another breakdown today because I had somebody tell me that, oh, black men are all violent and all of this bullshit. And I asked her, what portion of the prison population what portion of black men do you think are in the prison population? And then they told me, oh, well, I think 40 to 60% of black men are in the prison population. So I did a video that's a breakdown. Hey, there's 42 million black men in the country, or in the black people in the country. 20 million of them are black men. Only 840,000 black people are in jail currently, and that's in both jails and in federal prisons. Only 840,000. 840,000 of 19 million is 4.2%. So only 4.2% of black men are in jail. Black women, you need to stop telling the world that 60% of your black men are felons or are in jail. They aren't. 4.2% of black men are incarcerated right now or in jail. 840,000 out of 19,900,000. You need to stop saying that about us. That's why they don't feel bad about shooting us in the street. So I'm going to keep debunking these things that, using data to show folks like, hey, and I'm going to do breakdowns page by page by page because everybody's always asking me, hey, cite your sources, cite your sources. You guys will be able to pop people's name right into the video and see that I use the most updated census data that's available to construct the numbers that I've been espousing on the internet for the last year so that you guys know that, hey, like you guys need women, y'all need to stop saying this. This is the percentage of men that actually DV. These are the percentage of the men who actually SA. You need to stop saying this about men as a group. The vast majority of men have nothing to do with this stuff. And you're saying it about your black men. And then when we correct you, then you call it bashing. Well, here are the numbers, right? So I'm open to data. That's what I like. I'm a data guy and I don't mind reading because I'm not intellectually lazy. So in any event, I got to do some running before the kids hop up because I'm going to grab a couple more Christmas gifts, some shit my daughter mentioned to me last night. And there's a blizzard. So I'm going to be driving through some snow to go to Walmart to grab a shit. So
Marty, who's the greatest host like on this app and
oh, my
platform?
man, Noble Drew Ali. Yeah,
Double Drew
absolutely.
Ali.
Yeah, so you know who Noble Drew Ali is?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm just
cool.
laughing.
I'm glad you do. Everybody, if y'all don't know who Noble Drew Ali is, y'all should look him up. He's a very interesting character that was central to the movement and development of the Black Muslim, right? But in any event, yeah, man, you're the fucking man. This was a great show. We had over 500 people in this bitch at one point. So fucking awesome show, bro. You the man.
Appreciate you, Marty. I appreciate it. Well, we'll touch base. You and the family have a great holiday, and we gonna get back to it, man. We gonna stay on our necks.
All right. I appreciate you, man. We doing God's work, bro.
We
We out here doing God's work. Me and you gonna save the community all by ourselves, man. They're gonna erect statues to your ass.
we are doing God's work. Marty, have a great holiday, bro. We gonna listen. We gotta make sure we set them into the New Year's the right way. We gonna make sure we set them into New Year's the right way.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Have an incredible holiday to everybody that stayed on with us and listened to this from front to back. We appreciate you guys for coming
Facts.
into the show and
Facts.
listening. I know that we say some pretty wild shit from time to time, but there's absolutely nothing we say that doesn't come from a good space.
Right.
And
It's
the
not
point is to have an incredible dialogue with you. So stay out your fucking feelings and show up the next time we meet.
right. It was not. It doesn't come from a place of malice. Thank you, Taro. Hey, Marty. Taro's birthday is tomorrow. Tell Taro happy birthday, everyone. Everyone, tell Taro happy birthday in the chat. Let's
Oh man, my
yeah,
little brother's birthday is Christmas Eve, so
yeah.
that
Her
Carol
birthday.
gets gypped every year for Christmas and her birthday. People be getting their gifts and saying this for Christmas and your birthday.
I know,
When you're
right?
black, that's how people do you. Just so you know, this for
Drew,
Christmas and
what's
your
up?
birthday.
What's up, Drew? Yeah, everybody tell Taro happy birthday in the chat. Listen, I very much appreciate everyone that's here right now. I appreciate everyone that's been here, throughout this stream. Everyone that was on the panel. I don't even remember everyone that was on the panel. I like to say thank you to everyone, but I really do not remember everyone that was on the panel tonight. Thank you to everyone that was on the panel. Thank you to everyone, that came up here and participated. Thank you to everyone that was, participating in the chat. Make sure you were following the co-hosts. Make sure you were making friends in here. Yes, y'all heard what Marty said, man. Greatest host on this app. Greatest show on earth. Greatest show on this platform. So thank you to all of you. I appreciate y'all, whether y'all come here to support, whether y'all come here to be negative, whether y'all come here to be argumentative and combative. Shout out to all the ghost watchers. You know what I'm saying? You people that come here don't say anything, but you be watching. I appreciate all of you. I hope all of you have a great holiday. Hope all of you have a great Christmas. It's very cold here in Minneapolis right now. We've been snowed in the last couple of days. But wherever y'all are at, I hope y'all have a great holiday.